So in this next video, we're going to look at how we take that Python program created by the TkInter designer using our Figma design and actually make something that works out of it. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to actually start programming using some of the TkInter widgets to take an input and give you output, and some of the pitfalls that I've discovered along the way. So look forward to showing you some of these things later. In this video, I'm going to continue from where I showed you last time about using the module called TkInter Designer to import a design from Figma, the website, and create a TkInter framework for your Python program. I'm now going to develop that by showing you how you can actually use it. So how you can actually add your own code to the buttons and text boxes you've added. So this is what we're aiming for. It's not a particularly wildly exciting program, but it'll just be a calculator that's got two text boxes, and you can enter in two numbers, and when you press the button it adds them up. There's a little bit of error trapping as well, so if you type in a non-numeric character it prints out an error. So we're going to look at how we can adapt that. I'm also going to try and add some best practices so that you don't end up with spaghetti code. So that's going to be the plan for this video. Rewound my code, so it's back to how it looked before I added my extra bits to it. So if you follow the last video and you've exported your design into TkInter using the TkInter designer, you should end up with something that looks like this, a GUI.py, and when it pops up it should look the same. Your text boxes should have, you should be able to enter things into it, and if you've got a button, the only thing you'll get is a button one clicked. So let's have a quick look at the code here. So if I scroll down now, when I first designed this, I probably should have put them in the right order, the elements in my Figma design, so it looks a little bit all over the place. So you can see there's the canvas, which is basically the frame I've got in the background. If you want to tweak the size, you have to tweak it in two places, one in window geometry, one also down in the height and width here. So I think my original design was a bit long, so I've tweaked the height down in two places. And then I've got the image, so that's the background image there, and then there's the text that prints out Python calculator, so this is where I could change it, and the font. Then I've got the button image, so this is the add these numbers there. Notice you've got the X and Y coordinates. In the place function for all of your widgets, you've usually got an X and Y coordinate, so if you want to tweak it just slightly, you can change the numbers there. And then I'm going to come back to the command in a second, because that's what the first thing we're going to do to change it. But let's have a look. So I've got entry 1. Now what they've done is they put images behind the backgrounds of the text boxes. So you could remove those and then I wouldn't get the grey background there, but I'm going to ignore that for now. And then here we go. This is where it actually sets up the text box. What I ended up doing was changing the size of my input, because it was a bit small, so I boosted this. I can't remember, I think it was 12 when I started. I boosted it to 16. You've also got this other function called place, which actually places it and gives it an X and Y and a width and a height, so that's why it appears there. Similar thing for entry 2, and then entry 3 is a similar thing, except it's got a rounded background. I'm not going to use entry 3 eventually, because I don't want the user to be able to type in there, because originally I had it so that when you typed in those two numbers it would print it out there, but that's not very usable because people could type over the answer. So I'm going to kind of ignore that one. However, it's the knowing which entry is which that was a bit of a problem for me. So you'll need to check this, because when you create your Figma designer, it's not necessarily the one you think it is. Anyway, let's go back to this button, because we don't obviously want it to say button one clicked. What I'd like to do is get the entry out of here and add them. Okay, so first of all, let's find where it says button one clicked. Well, in button 1 there is a command, and at the moment it's a lambda, which is an inline function which prints out button one clicked. I want to go the traditional route and I want to actually create my own function. So for that I'm going to create a function called add. I haven't created it yet, and we'll talk about where the best place is to put it, but for now I'll do that. And if I just test that this is happily broken it, there we go, it says add is not defined, so it doesn't actually start drawing anything because it's come across something that says, oh, I don't know what add is, and it doesn't actually run the program. So let's create a function called def. Now, add. We'll need to put it above the main loop of the code, so I might as well just put it up here, okay? So def add, and like I always do when I'm creating my own functions, I just do a little print just to check it's working, okay? So nothing too difficult there. So hopefully now it boots up, and when I click the button, it says hello. So we've now started to customize this form to allow it to take our own functions. So how do we get the data out of those text boxes? Well, we want to use the name of the text box. So let's, so this text box is called entry 1. Let's copy that. And instead of printing hello, if we paste the name of the text box and then just do .get. Okay, so I'll do that for all actually I'll just do it for entry 1, and let's see what this does, because we'll need to do a little bit of debugging, I think, to work out which entry is which. Okay, so if I put 1, 2 and 3 and click add these numbers, I've got an error, and that is because when I do get entry, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? I think I need to put a get. Oh, I thought that would work. I will come back to you. Okay, I figured out what it was. So when I was getting the data out of what I'm hoping is text box entry called entry 1, when I'm calling the get function, I need to say from what character to get it. Very strange, because I'm sure it worked before without the brackets, and I'm sure someone will tell me why, but this does seem to work now. So if I run this again and pop up the text box, sorry, the TkInter form, I type the 3 characters in there and I print it out, and it prints out 3. So this is kind of why I didn't want to do all of them at once, because I wanted to show you that what I think is of entry 1 is actually this 3rd text box down here. I think it's to do with the order they were in the Figma design, so I'm not too worried about that. If I was doing this properly, I'd probably go back and reorder them, but for now I just wanted to point out that entry 1 is the 3rd one. So let's go and figure out where the others are. So if I change that to entry 2, I mean, we could probably do actually do a process of elimination and know that we want to get entry 2 and 3. So if I run that now, and if I do 1 and 2 and add these up, ooh, what have I done? 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 Very oh, do you know what it is? Do you know what it is? It's because entry 1 was a text box. That's why, because sorry, it was a text area, whereas so a multi-line text field, that was what entry 1 was, but these other ones are a single line, so I don't need to put a positional argument in. Right, my bad. If I'm betting the house that this will work now. So type in 1 there and 2 there, we get 1 and 2. Hooray! Okay, so what I might do is in my code always put some comments in there. Gets data from entry 1, and then do the same thing for the one below, just to remind me. Okay, so the next thing to do is let's create some variables. I'm just going to call them x and y, simply to make my life easier, and we'll create them x and y. Now, as you'll all know from Python, these will be strings. So if I try and do my fancy add and do x plus y, we won't get an arithmetically correct answer. So if I type in the number 5 and the number 6, we would expect it to print out 11, but it prints out 56. So it's actually using that plus sign as a concatenator rather than an addition. So what we'll need to do, as any good student will tell you, is turn them into integers. I'm going to do that in line here. We'll look at what happens when our silly users decide to type in something that can't be inted, but for now let's just get our maths working. Okay, so if I run this now, we should have got some kind of calculator going on. So 3 and 56, we should get 59. There we go, hooray. So our calculator is working. We've added our own algorithm, but we can make it look nicer. So we'll probably want to write it to that text area at the bottom, which is how I had it originally working. So what I might do is create a variable called answer and set it to x, little x plus y. Okay, then to write to a text area, we use get entry. Sorry, the name of our text area, which was entry_1. We need to delete what's in there, and I'll explain a bit more when we get this. And this is where we have to use that 1 0, and then we have to do something called TK end. Basically, text areas are a pain to work with. And then we want to then insert our lovely answer we've just calculated and use the insert function, and pretty much the same thing. We're going to insert it well, let's do it how I've done it before. TK end and insert our lovely answer. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, let's have 5 and 6. Add these numbers. Big fat error. I came across this before. Because we're working with text areas, and we'll probably stop using them in a minute, it's looking for this thing called end, which is a special value variable, constant, that's the word, that's inside the TK library. The way we're importing TkInter at the moment is the proper way, where we're actually specifying the individual things that we want. But I think if I import it the bad way, which is import everything, this might fix it, and we probably won't need the TK business. Okay, I'll probably have loads of people moaning at me in the comments about this, but if it works, I'm not going to worry about it. Right, so let's add 2 numbers. Answer is not defined. Oh, I called it ans. There we go. Let's try again. Come on. 2 numbers. 2 numbers. Hooray! Right, we've finally got some kind of working addition. Whoa! I collapsed it down. There it is. Let's go back to here. Right. So let's go back to my TkInter. So let's try another different number, and it seems to be working. Okay, we've got a problem though, that if I do something incorrect like that, you can see here I get some kind of error. So the first thing I'm going to do is do some kind of quick way of doing some kind of error. So what we're trying to do is use a try statement. So if you haven't come across try except statements, they're great for getting you out of all sorts of problems. Basically, I'm going to put all of that into a try statement. Again, I'm sure there'll be people in the comments complaining about how I'm doing this, but it mostly works. And then if there is any problem, I am going to fail gracefully. So I will just create a message that say error occurred. Spell occurred properly, that would be helpful. Right, and then we're going to print it out, because that's the kind of person we are. Print it out to the console, but let's also do this thing where we insert it into the entry down there. So we'll put the message there. So if I print this out and I act like a stupid user, so I'm trying to add 5 and this word here, I just get error occurred. So no red lines, just some nice errors, and it still works, hopefully, if I type those two numbers in. Okay, look, what I'm going to do now is get rid of that entry 1, which was that text area which we don't really want to use because we don't want people typing in there. That's going to be where our data, our addition, our result appears. So what we want to do is get rid of that entry and turn it into a label. So to do that, let's go back to the code, and it was down here, it was called entry 1. Now I'm going to leave it here because there are bits that I want to use, but I'm going to create me a new item. I'm just going to call it label. Let's leave it as label. And so with a capital L, label, this is the class name that's inside there. I'm going to create a text label just to say hello, just so that we can see it on there. And I can also create some, change the font as well. So I'll follow their convention of putting the parameters one under each other. So in order to actually put it onto the page, I'm going to follow the same idea of doing the place function. And because we basically want it pretty much over the top of our entry, I can copy that X and Y that the TkInter designer has kindly given us. So that should hopefully place my label on top of where the old entry is that we'll get rid of in a second. So let's just see if this works. I should get a fat box that says hello on it. Okay. I mean, at the moment, it's still, my answer is still appearing underneath. We just can't see it. Okay. So what we can now do is, if I go back here, I'm going to be bold and get rid of everything to do with entry image 1. Probably come up with a big error in a second. But if I want to write to a label, I don't have to do any of this entry 1 delete. So let's get rid of that because it's a bit messy. Let's get rid of that. But what we want to do, if I'm putting the answer in there, is it's a little bit funny, we do label, and then in square brackets we put the attribute that we're changing, which is text, and then set it equal to, in this case we want to set it equal to answer. And then I can do the same thing here, label, square brackets, text, put it in quotes, and then we're going to set that to my message. Okay, let's see if this works. So the reason we're doing this again is because we don't have a facility for creating labels in the Figma that we can then convert in TK Designer, so we have to do this ourselves. So if I do a simple addition, there we go, that works. And if I make a mistake, because I'm a stupid user, there we go, I get error occurred. So a little bit neater, but notice because this is a label, I can't change it. Brilliant. You could of course do some extra design on it. There are ways of putting the background color, but I'll let you figure that one out to make it look really nice. So let's talk a little bit about design ideas. At the moment I've just squidged my function up in the top here, and coming from a web design background, I quite like the idea of separating function from design. So the GUI.py that was created by this lovely TkInter designer is the design, but my actual functionality I'd like to put in a separate place. Now, I've been playing around with this and I haven't quite come up with the ideal answer, but I'll show you as far as I've got. We're going to look at how we can make our code a bit more modular, which is something that we need to do as programmers to make sure our code is more readable, reusable, easy to find bugs. So this is something that you should really be trying to do all the way through. So even though our code works, it's a bit messy because we've got our function that does things in the midst of all the rest of the code, which is drawing things. So what I'm going to try and do is use that code and store it in a separate file. Okay, so I've already gone and created a blank file called functions, which is in the same folder as my GUI Python file, and I am going to take out the add function and place it into this separate file here. So let's save functions, let's save GUI.py, but when I try and run GUI.py, it'll say add is not defined because it can't find it. So how do we link this file here, my functions.py, how do I link that with my to my GUI.py? Well, the answer is in these sort of statements up here. What you will have come across before, if you've ever done any work with random numbers, is the import random function. So it basically works the same way. If I've got a file called functions.py, I can just say import functions. But the problem is there I have to then use the name of the library, and wherever my button is, I have to put functions.add, or whatever my function is inside there. So if I run this, it should work, sort of. So let's see, so no error saying can't find add, but if I try and actually run this, I get a big fat red error. I'm not going to worry about that too much yet, we'll sort that out in a second. I'm going to look at another way of importing. So rather than doing this import method here, I'm going to use the other from something, import something, which is sometimes seen as a bit more elegant. And in this case, when I'm just importing one function, if I spell it right, from functions import, I can just choose add, and that adds that function add into the global namespace, so I don't actually need to preface it with functions dot in front of it. So if I run this now, again we don't get the, where is it? We don't get the error. It still doesn't quite work, but we'll look at that in a second. So why doesn't it work? Well, if you look at the errors, it's saying that it doesn't know what entry 2 is, but it also doesn't know what label is. And the reason for that is because we're in a separate file here, it has no idea about what these variables are. So we need to somehow work out how to pass the names of those variables back. What I'm going to do is probably not the best way of doing it, but we'll try it anyway. This is what worked for me. If I choose import to import the GUI module, so they're basically importing each other, okay? And then, as we saw before, if I preface everything with GUI dots, so anything that might have been a variable or an object in that original file, I will paste it. So I think it's just the entries and the labels. Okay, not too bad, there we go. And this time if I run my, so if I save that and run the functions Python, okay, we're not getting any errors, this is good. If I just press the button, excellent, I'm getting error occurred. Does it work for addition? Yes, it does. Okay, so there's probably lots of Python reasons for not doing it, and it feels a little bit bad that I'm importing one thing into one file, and then that thing is being imported into the other. But if anyone's got a better way of doing it, then please let me know. At least I've got my goal, which is separating the function from the design. So the design is just catered for in the GUI.py, and the functions are just catered for in there. I didn't want to make it much more complicated by having a further file, so it seems to be working fine now. Okay, see what you can make with this.